Hello, my name is Andrea Epteen, and I am a licensed professional counselor and a master's addictions counselor and a certified sex therapist. I am the founder and managing director of HUGS, Heads Up Guidance Services, and the owner and clinical director of Resolve Strategies LLC. Resolve Strategies LLC is a organization that focuses on the identification and effective treatment of all trauma-induced behavioral addictions, also known as process disorders. And the reason that we chose the name Resolve is because we think that it's very important to, at some point in the recovery process, truly resolve interpersonal conflicts and the things that keep people going back to old behaviors. So to really resolve in order to recover, and that's why we are called Resolve Strategies. Before we get started on the topic, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my perspective and what I would be speaking from today. I'll be coming from a place of 20 years experience in the field and working specifically with eating disorders and process addictions. This is coming from my professional experience and also some personal experience. Today we're going to be talking about abstinence versus recovery and really getting to know what each of those terms mean and what's the difference between them. On our website, we kind of post the upcoming topics and people were able to write in some questions. And I picked out some really good ones, I think. And I just want to take the opportunity to answer some of those questions. So the first question I have is, how does abstinence versus recovery affect co-occurring depression? I'll start by saying that abstinence initially, and probably for a very long period of time, is going to very much negatively impact that co-occurring disorder of depression, because entering in early on into a recovery process, be it behavioral or chemical, it brings a lot of emotions to the surface, and you really start to experience the kind of irrational thoughts. You're feeling down, you're feeling confused, you're conflicted, and of course that's going to exacerbate the depressive symptoms. So yes, definitely, if you have that co-occurring disorder and you're entering into recovery, expect at least the first 3 to 6 months for your depression to actually, those symptoms to seem to increase. And that's a healthy and normal part of the recovery process, but I think it's always kind of important to be prepared and know what to anticipate. In early recovery, you're dealing with, or just abstinence, I should say, not just early recovery, but abstinence across the board. If you're not in recovery, but you're just abstaining, you're starting to deal with a lot of these character defects that come up and all of these unhealthy and toxic relationships and patterns of behavior and all of this stuff, which, let's be honest, if you have depression, these things are all very depressing. So it is going to exacerbate that. And then all of those negative and faulty thoughts and behaviors, again, it's going to be a struggle. But abstinence only without recovery will have a very negative impact. So I hope I've completely answered your question. Thank you so much for writing in. The second question is, does anyone reach full recovery without working on all areas of self? In early recovery, you can expect to have a lot of cross addiction happening. So as the recovery process is uncomfortable, you might find yourself gravitating towards another mood-altering behavior or another mood-altering experience. So an example of cross-dependency would be someone's in early recovery from smoking nicotine, and so they then become cross-addicted and dependent more on self-soothing through food or something like that. So it's kind of a very fragile and vulnerable time. I don't know that we're ever fully recovered. We always have certain tendencies, and but in the world of recovery, you're definitely able to become self-aware and understand when you start to slip in to a slippery slope or old patterns of behavior start to creep up, and you can catch it early and you can identify it, whether it's with an old behavior or a new behavior. Again, going back to the question of, do they have to address all of these areas, physical, emotional, and spiritual, to fully realize the true essence and sense of recovery, yes. Yes, I think that you do. However, people can live, I think, beyond abstinence without all three things. Recovery is supposed to be something that is, serene and wonderful and peaceful, and something that is like when you're in recovery, you can manage life again. You can manage life on life's terms. You can get through the day, and you can function, and you can have hope for the future, and you can have all of these things. You can have a personality again. You can have an identity again. You can have a sense of humor, and you can stop taking yourself so seriously. You can have all these wonderful things in recovery, and that is the goal. Abstinence, on the other hand, is really just removing the behavior or removing the chemical, but all the underlying issues, all the interpersonal conflict, all of the trauma, all of that stuff is still there, which really just makes it miserable. That's not recovery at all. That's misery. We throw around the term, I think, quite often, especially in the rooms, if you're in a 12-step program or something like that, but we use the term dry drunk. That basically means what I'm describing, where all the character defects are still there, all of the anger, all of the rage, all of the depression, all the disappointment, all of the victimization, everything is still present except the one thing that you had to make that better. So oftentimes life in just abstinence is more miserable than the chaos of what you had when you were acting out. The third question was, what interventions can be done to help the client to transition from abstinence to recovery that will prevent relapsing? You're going to really use a heavy emphasis on relapse prevention planning. You're going to talk a lot about accountability, your sober support system. But as far as interventions, I would say cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, helping someone through the process of the 12 steps and really understanding powerlessness, unmanageability, and identifying a power greater than yourself that's going to restore you to sanity, that gets rid of that need to white knuckle it, because what you have established at this point is you can't handle not acting out in this behavior without assistance. And in that higher power, and that assistance can be offered through several different avenues, and it's the act of establishing that in both a physical sense and a spiritual sense. And so I love the first three steps. I can't, it can, he can, I think I'll let it. And so I think that's, something you really want to focus on, and then identifying negative, unhealthy, and toxic people, places, and things, and some of the things they're really going to have to be willing to permanently change. I think with behavioral addictions, there's this, and when you have a prolonged use or misuse of behaviors over time, this stuff becomes very, very ingrained. And some of it is ingrained in even a survival sense. So we're talking about food, we're talking about sex, which means stay alive, reproduce, do all of these things. So these are like very hardwired things. It becomes, I think, much more important that you seek out professional assistance, someone who really understands process disorders, behavioral addictions. And I think it just really depends on the individual. It depends on, honestly, a lot of neuroplasticity, which is a physiological word, but it in the mental health field we call it resiliency. So there's lots of reasons why somebody might be more resilient than someone else, and there's obviously a genetic component there too. So some people are able to enter into recovery more easily than others. The next question is, what is the family member's role in their loved one's addiction recovery? And I think it's a really great question, because I truly believe in family systems approach. Oftentimes, the individual who's really struggling with an addictive disease is the one who brings, the family, the sick family system into a recovery process, which is such a wonderful, amazing thing. Sometimes I say the identified patient is the system that gets the family into counseling. I love it. it's great to be able to identify who's more motivated. I mean, especially when you get, spouses and family members and stuff like that, where you might have a sex addict and a codependent. Sometimes the codependent's made more progress than the addict, and sometimes the addict has made more progress, but it's a great opportunity to get the whole family, the whole couple into long-term recovery where life makes sense again. Initially in the recovery process, the family's job is to get out of the way. Get out of the way. Let the person who is struggling with this disease find out how much they're truly struggling. So you need to get out of the way, stop enabling, allow them to feel the full weight of their natural consequences that are brought on by their disease. It's a really important part of the process to let somebody get out of the way enough to let somebody see how bad they really do need help, and let them get the help that they really need from unbiased parties. So that's another thing I love about counseling, is because it's unbiased. I really love, we do a great workshop at Resolve Strategies, and it's a codependency workshop that we do 2 times a year, and working with the family members who have been so significantly impacted by the process addictions of their loved ones. It's a really healing and amazing experience. And again, even if your loved one's not ready to get well, why not you? Why not you start the process? The next question is, what are common motivators for recovery? Common motivators for recovery are consequences. So, I mean, nobody wants to put down the one thing they perceive helps them cope with life if there weren't consequences that came away from it. One of my favorite definitions, I guess, of addiction is it's a pathological relationship to any mood-altering behavior that has life-damaging consequences. What are the benefits for professional support, or pitfalls? There's a lot of benefits. I don't think there's any potential pitfalls for pulling together a sober support team and a treatment team that understands specifically what you've been through, the development of your disease, your family history, and all of that, so that they can really come together to recommend a level of care that will be effective for you. That's important. It's important to understand that it's not about willpower. You have to really find out what level of care you need. I mean, you probably need a 12-step program. You probably need individual counseling. You probably need family counseling at some point in the process, or marital counseling at some point of the process. Group support, group counseling, accountability partners, church. We need a lot of these things in place. The professional team that you put together is going to really take you a long way and help you establish the level of care that's going to be effective in treating your disease. Because like I said, it's not willpower. It's not. It's about getting the dosage that you need to actually to address the issues. And so by dosage, I mean what level of care, how can we surround you and support you, and to what level do we need to do that. So I can't really see any pitfalls for that amount of support. So I think this is the last question. Which is more appropriate or important, abstinence or moderation? What helps you decide that? I think that's a very interesting question. If you're talking about chemical dependency or physiological addiction to a chemical like alcohol or marijuana or cocaine, abstinence is the only way to go. And it's not just abstinence from that specific chemical, but all mood-altering chemicals, so that they can stay the course in recovery. But when you move into the world of behavioral addictions, it's not just abstinence. I mean, if I'm a sex addict, I'm going to have to curb and understand my behavior and operate in line with, my recovery process, but I'm still going to have sex. So then moderation does become, a really big part. I just don't like the word moderation. Some behaviors, yes, you can absolutely abstain from, and there are no damaging consequences from that, and that's what we would work towards. But there are also some behavioral addictions, and I'm really kind of thinking about food and sex specifically, where there has to be a different recovery plan there. Thanks for all the awesome questions, and email us, let us know. be some topics posted, and if you have any questions about this particular segment or want to write in about, future topics, just send us an email and visit the website, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.